My ex-mother-in-law barged into my delivery room, claimed my baby was her son's, and caused chaos while I was in labor, sparking a family confrontation. I, 27 female, got married in the past to my ex-husband, 28 male, at the age of 23. We were married for a year and 5 months, I think, before we decided to go our separate ways. It was a mutual decision because neither of us could imagine spending the rest of our lives with the other. We were that sick of each other and couldn't even be in the same room without fighting, so it was best for us to just get a divorce and get it over with. My parents were all right with it because they knew they couldn't meddle in my life. My mother-in-law wasn't that okay with it because she was one of those people who believed that getting a divorce meant giving up on the marriage and that we should always keep trying to make things work. That's why she never left my father-in-law despite knowing about his multiple affairs over the years. But I didn't belong to the same school of thought, and I tried to explain that to her as gently and politely as I could, because she'd been very nice to me for as long as I'd been married to my ex-husband. I felt worse for breaking her heart than I did about the divorce. It was finalized about 2 years ago, and that was the last time I heard from or spoke to my ex-husband. I moved to a different part of the city for work after that, and we didn't want to keep in touch. We also didn't have a lot of friends in common. Just maybe 2 people who we were both close to since we'd all known each other from our first internship. I didn't know what he was up to for the last 2 years, and I assumed that he wouldn't know about me either. We didn't even have each other added on social media anymore. I wouldn't say that we hated each other or anything. We were still civil, but we just didn't want to see more of each other at the time. We'd had enough. After my divorce, I thought that I would swear off men for a while, but then I met my current partner. My fiancé, male, and I have been together for about a year, and he doesn't mind the fact that I started dating him just months after my divorce. To be fair, my ex and I had been broken up for a long time in our heads, but it was just the legal process of the divorce that made the period seem longer. He knew about my past and didn't care that I'd been married before, but I can't say the same for his mother. She was a bit uptight about the whole thing when I first met her 6 months into our relationship. I could tell that she was trying not to be bothered by my history, but she was very closed off around me and didn't like me very much. I tried my best, but even then, she didn't exactly warm up to me in spite of meeting me a couple more times. So I decided that I'd just sit back and go with the flow instead. If she liked me eventually, good for her. If she didn't, then at least I'd know that I tried. Now coming to the pregnancy, my fiancé, and I found out that I was pregnant 4 weeks into the pregnancy, and I decided to keep the baby. My fiancé was thrilled about it, even though we'd only been together for a short while at that point in time and weren't even married, but none of that mattered to him. He said that he knew deep down that I was the one for him, and I felt the same way, so things worked out pretty perfectly for us. We didn't get married, though, because I didn't want another wedding so soon, and my fiancé respected my feelings. For one thing, my emotions and hormones were in overdrive during the pregnancy, and I didn't want to agree to something during that time and then regret it later because it was quite possible that I'd feel differently about marriage once the baby was born. Also, I didn't think it was a good idea for me to just jump from one marriage to another. I wanted to first make things work with my fiancé during and after the pregnancy and see how we'd handle situations. Only then would I be ready for a second marriage. I think I was very rational and reasonable, and my fiancé also agreed with me. But his mother thought that I was being too dramatic about this whole thing and kept insisting that we get married before the baby comes along. She thinks that babies born outside of marriage are illegitimate, and a certain word that begins with B that I won't say here because I don't like it. I didn't agree with her at all, but I held back and refrained from arguing with her because it didn't feel worth it. I didn't care, and neither did my fiancé. As long as the two of us were okay with how our responsibility was going, there was no need for us to care about what someone on the outside thought. My fiancé did propose to me during the 7th month of my pregnancy, though, and I said yes without skipping a beat because I knew that he was the right guy for me. I could feel it. I'd never felt that way with my ex, so I knew that this was for real. Marriage could wait, but at least we were engaged to be married, and that was something. His mother still wasn't happy, but there wasn't much that we could do about that, and we didn't want to fix it either. She'd been sour throughout the pregnancy, and honestly, she ruined my vibe every time she'd come visit us to meet the baby. Every time she'd visit, she'd wait for my fiancé to leave the room and then start rambling about how important it is for a man and a woman to be married before bringing a child into this world. Sometimes, she'd even read about the benefits of marriage before having kids from articles, and I'd just have to nod along and pretend to care. Then, almost a week ago, I went into labor and was rushed to the hospital by my parents because my fiancé was at work. They'd been coming over to look after me while my fiancé was at work every day for the last couple of weeks because I was so close to my due date, and they didn't want me to be alone at any point in case I went into labor. My mother-in-law had volunteered to be with me, but I would rather be by myself than with her. My fiancé came to the hospital as soon as he could, and so did his parents. Everyone was there within an hour. That was everyone whom I'd expected would show up, but then, a few minutes later, my ex-mother-in-law barged into the room all of a sudden. We had a private birthing suite, and not more than 2 people were allowed to be in the room at once, and only 1 during the delivery. So I had chosen my fiancé and my mom to stay in the room with me, and only my mother while I was giving birth. But my ex-mother-in-law was so hysterical and strong all of a sudden that she'd actually powered through the hospital staff and my other family members outside to barge into the room and declare that the baby I was giving birth to was her son's. Her son, who I hadn't even seen for like 2 years, ever since the divorce was finalized. She literally had to be dragged out of the room by 2 male nurses while she screamed at me to tell them all the truth and accept that I'd been cheating on my fiancé with my ex all this while so she could finally have her grandchild with her. I was shocked and didn't understand what the hell was going on, nor did I know what to make of the absurd things she was saying. Unfortunately, she'd said it all loud enough for probably the entire hospital to hear. While my fiancé was shocked, he tried not to let it get to him. His mother was suddenly outraged and stormed into the room, requesting my mother to leave so she could speak to me. When my mother refused, she started arguing with her right there in her shrill voice. I was in labor and really couldn't have cared less about anyone else's feelings at that point. So I yelled at her to get the hell out, or I'd make security throw her out instead. I had tried my very best to keep my cool throughout the pregnancy, but while in labor, I was already in a lot of discomfort and pain, so I really couldn't be bothered to deal with her crap as well and finally lost it. Even the nurse in the room was surprised at my outburst because she'd been trying to get my fiancé's mom out of the room for 3 minutes, but she'd been too busy arguing with my mom. After I yelled at her, she finally had the decency to leave. I then tried to focus all my energy on just getting the delivery of the baby done, and a couple of hours later, I'd given birth to my son. I still didn't want to think about my ex-mother-in-law and her sudden reappearance, so I told everyone else except my fiancé to go home. And I'd meet them later while I spent the night at the hospital since it was already pretty late by the time I gave birth, a little past midnight. My fiancé was really sweet afterward and didn't bring up anything that I didn't want to talk about. He just stayed with me and took care of me throughout the night. The next day, we finally came back home, and I told my fiancé that I didn't want to see his mother for a couple of days and he had to make sure she didn't come here. I told him all about the way she'd been getting on my nerves throughout the pregnancy, and he looked surprised because he thought that his mother actually liked me. But after I told him everything, he assured me not to worry and that he'd make sure she didn't come to see me or the baby until I was ready. After I was discharged from the hospital, it was finally time for me to talk to my ex and find out what exactly his mother had been up to. I didn't want to hide anything from my fiancé, so with him by my side, I made a call to my ex. Luckily, he did answer because he'd probably seen this coming. On the phone, he explained that he'd been seeing someone for a while, and we shared similar names that sounded the same. He'd been trying to keep it a secret from his mother because she'd literally been hounding him about getting married again and having kids soon. He didn't want to introduce his new girlfriend to his mom and have her scare her away with her obsession to get her son to start a family. For some reason, his mother had assumed that my ex and I had gotten back together after she'd overheard him talking to his girlfriend on the phone one time around 3 weeks ago and had mistaken her name to be mine since. They sounded similar. Since then, she'd been asking about me, and my ex had allowed her to even believe that we were together again because at least that would prevent her from constantly nagging him about marriage and kids. He told her that I needed time to come to terms with this and that it would be best if she stayed away from me for the time being, which is why she hadn't contacted me. Unfortunately, that day at the hospital, my ex-mother-in-law's sister also happened to be there for a health checkup, and I had the misfortune to be spotted and recognized by her. I'd seen my ex's aunt only a handful of times, but since my ex-mother-in-law and her sister are close and share everything, she also believed I was seeing my ex-husband. When she saw a heavily pregnant me being rushed towards the birthing suites, accompanied by another man and 2 families, she instantly informed my ex-mother-in-law, and that was how the woman ended up barging into my room. She got away with it because I was too busy delivering a baby and didn't want to press charges against her, but thankfully she did get thrown out of the hospital. Then she came back home and confronted my ex about what she saw, and that's when she learned the truth. Unfortunately, neither of them had the guts to call me up and tell me any of this. They waited for me to call them first so I could ask, and then they'd finally tell me what had happened. It was ridiculous and very irresponsible of my ex and his mother, and I had half a mind to file a restraining order against both of them because it was crazy and could have gone south very easily. He apologized and told me that they were moving out of the state so he could live with his new girlfriend. Anyway, and I have nothing to worry about now. My fiancé was also really annoyed by all of this, and after the phone call, he told me that he'd been really concerned and confused when my ex-mother-in-law had barged in like that. But he trusted his gut because he knew that I'd never do that to him, and so he kept quiet throughout and held it together for my sake because I was giving birth to his baby then, and that's all that mattered. It was really sweet of him, and I'm grateful that I have such a trusting and kind man as my fiancé. Once we knew the truth, we told our families about it as well, and of course, we expected them to be okay with all of it. But my fiancé's mother was far from okay. She wanted her son to get a paternity test done at the earliest and refused to change her mind even after she learned the truth. I was okay with the idea and didn't care because it would just show her what an idiot she was being, but my fiancé put his foot down and told her that he was going to do no such thing because he trusted me explicitly. His mother had been trying to get him to get a paternity test right from the time that the whole fiasco with my ex-mother-in-law took place, but my fiancé wasn't on board with that. I found it a little strange that he was refusing to get that test done because if I was in his place, I might have thought the same. So I asked him why he wasn't okay with the idea. He told me that his entire life he'd always done exactly what his mother had asked him to, but now he was tired of being her puppet all the time. He didn't want to constantly dance to her tunes and do what she wanted him to do, especially now that he had more people to worry about. It wasn't as much about the test as it was about his own self and his relationship with his mother. So essentially, the real reason he refused to get the test done was because he didn't want to give his mother the satisfaction of knowing that she'd pushed him into doubting me somehow. I respected that. It was pointless anyway, because I hadn't been with anyone else after my fiancé, and it literally couldn't have been anyone else's baby but his. For a week, my fiancé has been fighting with his mother over this, and both of them are as stubborn as the other. I want to suggest that they go no contact, but my fiancé told me that he doesn't want to lose his dad as well, since the poor old man has always counted on him to visit and keep in touch. His mother's not the easiest person to live with. His dad's kind of older than his mom, and at his age, he finds it difficult to fight his mother and stand up for himself the way he used to because it takes a toll on him mentally. He mostly relies on my fiancé now. His dad always stood up for him when he was younger and made sure he didn't have to follow all his mother's ridiculous rules and had some freedom at least. My fiancé visits his parents almost every other weekend, and I really like that about him because I do get along with his dad. So I can see where he's coming from. His dad also cannot leave his mother because they've been together for over 3 decades, and he loves her too much to actually leave. Going no contact is not a viable option for us right now, but at the rate things are going, there might not be any other way out for him. His mom hadn't spoken to me directly so far, but yesterday she called me up and told me that I needed to get that paternity test done as soon as possible, or else she'd be the one to go no contact with us instead. She threatened me, saying that she'd never let my fiancé set foot in her house ever again if I didn't get that test done. In the heat of the moment, I told her that I'd wish she'd cut us both off as soon as she can because I'm sick of her and her nagging. I was really tired because having a baby isn't easy, and despite all the help from my fiancé and parents, I was still emotionally and physically exhausted. She wasn't helping the situation by acting this way, so I went ahead and said whatever came to me first. She hasn't contacted me since. She hasn't spoken to my fiancé either, and I'm afraid that I might have messed up by reacting the way I did. If she does cut us off, I don't think my fiancé will be very happy about it because of his relationship with his dad, and it's not my place to interfere there. But to be fair, she's the one who involved me by calling me up in the first place, so it's not my fault. I'm just confused about what to do with this. So to be very honest, AITA for telling my future mother-in-law that she can cut me and my fiancé off if she wants to, because she kept pushing us to get a paternity test over a misunderstanding? Update 1. So I read through the comments on the post, and I told my fiancé about what happened immediately afterward. You guys were right, I should have told him about the call as soon as it happened, but I was too tired for some emotional confrontation at the time, so I didn't say anything. But of course, I can't keep this a secret, and it's not worth it either, so I told him everything. He was furious, not at me, but at his mother for dragging me into this. It's actually pretty messed up because I literally had a baby just a little over a week ago, and in spite of that, she doesn't think there's anything wrong with her calling me and threatening to cut us off just to stress me out. My fiancé trusts me, and that should be enough for her. I don't even know why she's getting so worked up about this whole thing in the first place. But then again, there's usually never an explanation for the things that she does. She's just a crazy control freak and wants everything to work out her way without any concern for what others feel and think. So now, instead of wasting time arguing with his mother, my fiancé decided to talk to his dad instead. The only reason his dad hasn't left yet is because of his age and because he thinks that he loves her, which, in my opinion, is not the case. He's just used to her presence, and that's what he thinks love is. And even if he does love her for argument's sake, she most definitely doesn't. Her idea of love is bossing people around and making sure she has 100% control over their lives and that they're basically nothing more than her puppets. That's not love. and I don't think she understands that. So I'm glad that a person like that isn't going to be a part of my life anymore. More importantly, she's not going to be a part of my baby's life. My fiancé is currently at his parents' house trying to convince his dad to leave his mother so he can finally say goodbye to her before we get married. The last thing we need is her trying to micromanage our wedding and then our married life. I'll keep you guys in the loop for whatever happens. Update 2. Hey. So yesterday my fiancé went over to his parents' place to talk some sense into his dad and get him to finally leave his mother. He was there for about 5 hours, and when he finally came back home, his dad was with him, with his bags. It was really late, so I didn't post an update, but today I have time since my mom's taking care of the baby right now. My fiancé was able to talk to his father yesterday only because his mother was stupid enough to let him in when he visited her, believing that he was there to apologize to her and tell her that he dumped me. But he stood his ground and kept talking to his dad to get him to leave. She didn't call the cops because she was too conscious of her image and reputation among her neighborhood friends, or else she might have tried to get him to leave. But the most that she could do was scream at him to drown out his voice. His father was obviously really conflicted and had no idea what to do, but gradually my fiancé got to him, and he agreed that he just couldn't live with his wife anymore. Their marriage had been over for a long time, but he just hadn't realized it because he was so in love with her. Unfortunately, it didn't mean anything because those feelings weren't mutual at all. She just wanted to control them all, and that was what love was for her. My future father-in-law finally decided to leave, and that led to another huge fight between him and his wife. But he stood his ground, and this time, after a long verbal argument, he finally just gave up and left to start packing his bags while she continued to shout at him and threatened him that she'd never take him back if he left. It didn't matter, though, because he'd made up his mind, and he was going to leave no matter what. She was too stubborn and didn't even try to stop him once she saw that his bags were packed. She finally let them both leave, slamming the door hard after they were gone as well. So now his father is living with us, and so are my parents. It's a little stuffy and crowded, but truth be told, I love it this way because I've always loved the idea of having a big family. They're all helping out with the baby and the chores, so I have no complaints since I'm being treated like a princess now. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law is not going to get to see this or be a part of this due to her stubbornness. Sucks to be her, just can't help it. Update 3, so this is going to be a really short update. It's been almost a month since I'm married. My husband and I got married 2 weeks back in the presence of our close family and friends, and it was super intimate and beautiful. My father-in-law is currently in the middle of a divorce. My mother-in-law is still not talking to us, but I'm really happy without her, and so is everyone else. The poor lady doesn't even realize that we don't care, and thinks she's punishing us by cutting us off. It's just sad for her, but at least my family is happy, so who cares?